APICS is now simply an acronym, but once stood for American Production and Inventory Control Society. As you might imagine, if inventory is in the name, it must be important. APICS materials are the sole property of APICS. APICS materials are for the user's educational use only. APICS materials may not be copied, reproduced, recorded, downloaded, distributed, or displayed electronically or otherwise by such users for any purpose. One premise of anything APICS is understanding inventory. Any student of CPIM, CSCP, or CLTD should be familiar with the inventory and inventory management concepts. For this, I refer to the APICS Essential Introduction to Inventory Management by Arnold and Chapman. Inventories are materials and supplies in a supply chain, either for sale or to provide inputs, supplies to the production process. All business and institutions require inventories unless customers are content with waiting days or weeks for deliveries. Often inventory values are a substantial part of total assets. Financially, on the balance sheet, inventories can represent from 20 to 60% of total assets. As inventories are used, their value is converted into cash, improving cash flow and return on investments. There is also a cost of carrying inventories, which increases operating costs and decreases profits. If product is lost, expires, or becomes unusable, overall company profitability can suffer. Good inventory management is essential to an efficient and responsive supply chain. Inventory is typically held to satisfy customer demand, whether the customer is internal or external. For example, retailers never want to lose a sale because the item is not in stock, and production managers do not want to shut down a machine because enough raw materials or work in process is not available. There is also the concept of supply chain trade-offs, where inventory levels are viewed different by different stakeholders, a topic we will cover in another lesson. The APICS CLTD 2019 and 2020 CLTD learning system provides a good visual of inventory types. We see various types of inventory, raw materials, WIP, finished goods, etc., can be seen across the supply chain. Inventory exists mainly as a result of a process and management decisions. For example, when you decide to buy material in advance of a manufacturing process, it is considered raw materials as soon as the material is received by the purchasing company and accounted for. In this example, raw materials are typically products that are coming in from a supplier. So raw materials will be coming from the supplier into your process. Typically raw materials, as I said before, are the result of a purchase order being placed and then received into the warehouse. It can be actually put into storage, but it's not actually put into the manufacturing process yet. Here we can also see work in process or work in progress, which is anything that's going on within your manufacturing process where you've taken raw materials and converted them, but they're not actually moved yet into a finished goods. And then finished goods are products that have finished the manufacturing process, maybe all the inspections are complete, and it is in a final saleable condition. So you can see finished goods would then be transferred and sold out. But you can see the different levels. So actually the raw material inputs from a supplier would be their internal finished goods that they are selling to their customers. And then your finished goods, if you're shipping them to a distribution center or to a wholesale distributor that they bought, your finished goods will become inputs. Their inputs would be the raw materials, possibly, if they're doing more manufacturing processes. You can also see down below, we'll talk maintenance, repair, and operating supplies. Those are the supplies that really support the overall operations. They're also considered consumables. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into these different types of materials. The APICS dictionary defines the following: raw materials, purchased items or extracted materials that are converted via the manufacturing process into components and products. The materials can be, in a traditional sense, something in raw form. For example, iron ore, grains, or crude oil. Raw materials can also be something converted into a semi-usable form by your suppliers, but will be used in your production kitting process to create a usable finished good you can provide to your customers. So in some instances, the raw materials, let's go back. In this case, raw materials can also be purchased sub-assemblies. So if you're purchasing something from a subcontractor that you're going to then use to convert into a finished good, then a purchased sub-assembly could be considered a raw material as a primary input to your processes. Work in process or work in progress is a good or goods in various stages of completion throughout the plant, including all inventory from raw material released for initial, let me get that right, so raw material released for initial processing up to completely processed materials awaiting final inspection and acceptance as finished goods inventory. So it hasn't yet been approved for sale. It hasn't gone through acceptance or inspections. Maybe there's a final process that needs to be done, but it's anything really that lies between raw materials. So I'll say raw materials here, finished goods are here, another type. So anything that lies in between those is going to be my WIP. Just a good example there. As a WIP is converted into a final saleable product, it is considered finished goods. If you're studying CPIM2, the content gets into a bit of a gray area, stating WIP includes raw materials and finished goods. But for our intents and purposes, let's just say WIP is everything between raw materials and finished goods. Finished goods are those items on which all manufacturing operations, including final test, have been completed. These products are available for shipments to the customers as either end items or repair parts. As the raw materials, WIP, and finished goods are moved either between operations or between facilities and even companies, the inventory is considered in transit, pipeline, or transportation inventory. The inventory still has to be accounted for and managed as it is being moved. Pipeline stock is interesting depending on the learning system you're reviewing. It is presented as either a type or a function and goes by several names, for example, in transit, distribution, or transportation. Dictionary defines pipeline stock as inventory in the transportation network and the distribution system, including the flow through intermediate stocking points. Typically, we look at pipeline stock or transportation stock as something that's moving between companies or actually between physical facilities. The function of pipeline stock is rather null. The driver is getting product delivered from point A to point B. Think about this as the amount of inventory in transit. Until we can get 3D printing as a viable, cost-effective solution, product will need to be delivered and exist in the pipeline. So if you're importing products from Asia, for example, your inventory, your pipeline transportation stock can be significant. But basically, if you look at transportation stock, we're looking at anything that is going to be essentially moving from point A to point B, and that's going to be almost a plant-to-plant transfer or a company-to-company transfer. So it's something outside, typically, of your physical campus. A final type of inventory is maintenance, repair, and operations, or MRO. Maintenance, repair, and operating supplies or items used in support of general operations and maintenance, such as maintenance, supplies, spare parts, and consumables. You can think about these things maybe as your rags, oil, grease, anything that needs that's used, even spare parts for your maintenance and your equipment can be considered MRO. A student in the class also once pointed out MRO inventory is not generally included in total inventory evaluation on the balance sheet itself. The inventory levels for these types will vary depending on many variables, including the manufacturing strategy, which is a different topic we'll cover later, the company's overall approach to lean, the purchasing strategies, and your general management philosophy. So if you can imagine here, if you're familiar with the make to order, make to stock, assemble to order, engineer to order strategies, each one of those will have different processes and different needs for these types of inventories. So let me just fill this in here for you. Raw materials inventory in a make to stock environment will typically be pretty low. I mean, I say low if you have effective management and purchasing strategies. Work in process material and make to stock is probably going to be, I'll classify that as medium. Finished goods inventory in a make to stock environment, because it's typically a push strategy, is going to be high. So it's probably going to be the highest level of all the different strategies. Pipeline stock, that's going to depend on your transportation strategies. I'll say that's medium, and inventory cost is going to be typically going to be pretty high because it's almost working in a push environment. Make to order, I'll just finish these out here. Make to order raw material is going to be kind of medium. Basically, you want to have enough raw materials that you can start making to order anytime that you have an order placed. So if you have the raw materials in stock, it shortens your lead times. WIP is going to be, I'll say, low, might even be zero. Finished goods inventory will be zero if you're shipping the products as soon as they're complete. Pipeline stock, maybe I'll just say it's low again because we have some raw materials inventory that we might need to be moving in, or it depends on how you account for it, getting it shipped to the customer. And overall, the inventory cost is going to be low. Assemble to order, the raw materials inventory, again, I'll just say that's going to be low to medium, depending on how many sub-assemblies that you're stocking in the facility. I guess sub-assemblies wouldn't be considered raw materials unless you're classifying them, or if they're purchased as raw materials coming in from subcontractors. WIP will be probably pretty high because you have a high amount of sub-assemblies and or raw materials waiting configuration to the final order. Finished goods inventory was typically going to be zero because as soon as you're not doing anything until the order is placed. So you ship it out. Pipeline stock, again, I'm going to say that's low depending on your transportation strategies. And inventory cost, we'll just classify that as a medium level. Engineer to order, let's just run through those. We typically wouldn't do anything until we have an order placed. So no raw materials. WIP might be low. We're going to have something moving around just depending. Finished goods, I'm going to say is zero because you'll ship it out as soon as you get it. Pipeline stock, we'll just say that's low. And inventory cost, I'm going to call that one a varies. So that type of stock, cost of inventory and engineer to order will vary depending on the types of products that you're receiving in. These inventory types are fundamental to all APICS body of knowledge. You can see here the types that are referenced throughout each learning system, with more emphasis being placed on CPIM1 and CSCP has a mention to the different inventory types. And CLTD has just a cursory reference, but basically all inventory types. So if we look at, we're just looking at the inventory types now. So we can see these are all going to be key terms. Key terms for CSCP, CLTD, and CPIM. You can see CPIM2 basically builds upon CPIM1, so it's really not discussed in much detail within that body of knowledge. To help reinforce the concepts, I'm going to do a little bit of a whiteboarding here for you just to kind of show, again, some of the concepts just to reinforce that. So let me do a whiteboard for you and kind of just again go through the 5 fundamental processes. So if we look at it from a single manufacturer standpoint, I'm going to have the manufacturer here. I know not everybody's a manufacturer, but let's just look at a manufacturing supply chain. And then there's the customer and then the supplier here. So we have our 3 entities for our supply chain. So anything coming in that we placed a purchase order for, that will be raw materials. So RM comes in, anything that we finish going out is a finished goods. So finished goods get sent to the customer, but anything going on within the manufacturing process. So once we convert the raw materials into the production process, it then becomes WIP. So WIP can go between machines, depending on how many operations we have. It wouldn't necessarily be transport inventory between the work centers, but essentially WIP would be anything that goes on within the process until it's reached a final point, then it becomes finished goods and it's shipped out. The transportation stock or in-transit stock would be here. Again, the costing is going to depend on your terms and contracts, and transportation stock, again, would be getting product moved from one company to the other. And then across the board, overall, MRO supplies would be supporting the operations in aggregate. So now let's go back and do a couple practice questions just to see how our learning concepts are being reinforced. So let me get to it. Which of the following is most likely to be stocked by a manufacturer in a make-to-order environment? So if you recall make-to-order, we basically said we might want to have something in stock that we can start making the product as soon as we get the orders. So in that case, the answer will be raw materials. You might have sub-assemblies, but you typically in a make-to-order environment, you don't do anything until you have an order. Finished goods, that would be a make-to-stock type of environment, and the manufactured parts are not a type of inventory. The next one, if a company is utilizing a make-to-stock environment, customer orders are satisfied from which of the following? I kind of just answered that one a little bit earlier, but in a make to stock environment, we're basically building stock to finish goods to a warehouse. So the customers can place the order. There's very minimal lead time. They don't want to wait around. A lot of that is probably stuff that's in your retail stores. So finished goods inventory is the answer. A couple more. All of the following are examples of raw materials except, and you see the term there, except purchase parts, purchase materials, subassemblies, product ready for shipment to the customer. So all the following are examples of raw materials except. So purchase parts are raw materials, purchase materials are raw materials. The next two, they can be a little bit dicey depending on how you look at the answer, but let's look at the best answer. So from what my understanding, raw materials, product ready for shipment to the customer, that's actually going to be a finished goods. So the I'm sorry, and so that would technically be the right answer. So that would be a finished goods. You might go back and say subassemblies could be WIP, for example, but in this case, I'm just going to make the assumption the subassemblies are being purchased. So the best answer, all the following are examples of raw materials except product ready for shipment to the customer. Work in process or WIP inventory is items used in support of general operations and maintenance, product in the transportation network and the distribution system, product available to ship to the customer, a good or goods in various stages of completion throughout the plant. Well, if you understand the basic concepts of what we're looking at, items in support of general operations and maintenance, that would be MRO, product in the transportation network and the distribution system, that's in transit or distribution or pipeline. Product available to ship to the customer is a finished goods, and D is a good or goods in various stages of completion, or work in process or WIP. A couple more, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies are items used in support of general operations and maintenance. Product in the transportation network, product available to ship to the customer. A good or goods in various stages of completion, that kind of just goes back, we just answered that one. So A, items used in support of general operations and maintenance. And then how does long production runs impact the inventory investment performance objective? Again, this kind of goes to more of a strategic question. So long production runs means you're going to have a lot of WIP. You're probably going to be making to stock. So you're also going to be producing a lot of finished goods inventory. So you're going to be pushing inventory. So in that theory, this is typically going to result in higher levels of finished goods inventory investment. So you're going to be almost pushing stock. This is almost a make to stock environment. But if you just understand long production runs, they're going to create larger batches and inventory. Again, a lot of it depends on your distribution strategy, but in general, the best answer will be results in higher levels of finished goods inventory. There are 5 categories used to classify inventories. Which of the following is not one of the 5 inventory categories? Work in process, finished goods, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies, or exported goods. Well, we all understand the first 3 are one of the 5 types. The last one, exported goods, are not. But a key lesson here, again, just to understand, so you see a key thing that APICS will do is use the terms like not. So you have to make sure you read the questions fully to understand. In-transit inventory is best described as which of the following? Parts moving through a cell in a manufacturing, parts moving from a plant to a distribution center, parts moving from one operation to another, parts being put away in the warehouse. Well, if you remember, I talked about typically part interplant transfers, or parts moving between operations are typically not classified. So in this case, parts moving from plant to plant or plant to distribution center would be considered in-transit distribution. So that's why some companies will prefer to keep their distribution centers closer to their manufacturing operations. We hope this information helps you improve your knowledge and understanding of inventory types. Send us a note if you have questions, comments, or better ways to explain inventory and inventory types. Thanks for listening.